Welcome to the Fascia-Informed Therapist, the essential podcast for occupational therapy professionals looking to deepen their understanding of fascia's pivotal role in therapy and health. I'm your host, Amy Mayer, an experienced occupational therapist, practice owner, and dedicated educator. Here we'll dive into the fascinating world of fascia, exploring its significance in the human body and its critical influence on occupational therapy practice. Each episode will bring you cutting-edge insights, expert interviews, and practical strategies to help you confidently integrate the science of fascia into your therapeutic approach. Whether you're a seasoned practitioner or just starting out, our goal is to equip you with high-quality, evidence-based, and fascia-informed continuing education opportunities that will enhance your skills and benefit your clients. So join us as we unravel the complexities of fascia and transform the way you practice occupational therapy. All health and wellness practitioners are welcome. Let's learn, grow, and evolve together. Hi, this is Amy, and this is another edition of the Fascia-Informed Therapist. And I am not sure that I'm going to get this episode out on time. I'm kind of doing it at the 11th hour, the time that I usually like to have them posted on Sunday afternoons. And it's not really quite like me to be doing this, but I will admit I am a little burnt out. This last month has been something every single weekend. The first weekend in March, I went home to see my dad, and that's about a 4-ish hour drive one way, and spent some time with him. It was his birthday in February, so I really wanted to get there to see him. He is in, I don't know if I've ever talked about my dad on this podcast, but he is in long-term care. He just turned 85, and he has a progressive neuromuscular disease that has been slowly taking over his body since I was in high school. Yeah, in high school, he jumped off a little platform in our backyard and his legs didn't hold him. And this was like a 2-foot platform, and recognized something wasn't right. I watched him get back up there and do it again, and it was the weirdest thing. And I was just a kid, so I really didn't know what was going on. But slowly, after many visits to Mayo Clinic up in Minnesota, they really didn't know what to call it, and they eventually traced it back. They think what happened was when we lived out in the country and were surrounded by fields, and one day one of my younger brothers and my dad were out in the yard. I don't know what they were doing, but they were the only two out in the yard. The rest of us were either in the house or gone doing something else. And the crop sprayer plane flew over our yard, our property, and didn't turn off the pesticide sprayer. And my brother and my dad got doused in pesticides. And of course, my dad knew enough to get them both in there and get them cleaned up, and but really didn't think much of it until years later. This happened with my dad, and then my younger brother also went through leukemia as a child, not too long after that, a couple of years, I think, after that happened. But anyway, and the rest of my family has really done pretty okay. So anyway, progressive neuromuscular disease. He's now he lives in long-term care in Northeast Iowa and is fully cognitively present, but max transfer of 2 and in a power chair that he can still control. But the tension, the spasticity and tone in his body and the weakness has slowly worked its way from his legs up his body, and now it's finally reached where he really can't talk anymore. Once in a while, if I can really get him to articulate, he can say a few words that'll, like, for instance, when I went home, I was able to bring my daughter and my grandson as well, and he would say a couple words like, I could hear him say light bright, and that was a story he wanted to tell my grandson about my daughter when she got a light bright stuck up her nose, and she didn't want to tell me or her dad because she was afraid she'd get in trouble. So Papa was the one that helped her get it out. So anyway, so my dad, he can point and spell, and he had a speller talking tool for a while, but now his coordination and his vision is gotten poor enough that he can't use that effectively either. So anyway, it's tough because my dad is a super sweet, social, caring man. Like, it's one of my jobs is to keep him in sugar-free candy so he can keep it by his door so people can come get candy from his room in the long-term care center. So he's kind of the teacher's pet there. But yeah, my dad is a really, really cool dude, and really has a wonderful attitude for everything that has gone through with his body for the last many decades. And just if you're curious, my mom she passed 6 years ago now. Anyway, that was not at all what I was going to talk about today, but maybe that's just my head is just kind of in this burnt out place. But so that was the first weekend in March. The second weekend in March, we had several workshops for the public facing workshops. And then the next weekend in March, we had another public facing workshop, the Releasing Stuck Emotions. And Lisa was a guest on the podcast a couple weeks ago. And then the next weekend, we taught a workshop. One of these weekends, we taught a workshop, or was that in February? Yes, the next week, one of the weekends, the 8th, we taught our all-day 7-hour CE workshop for Bergen Hospital here in Omaha. Yesterday was the Nebraska OT Association, and we did an afternoon session, and that's kind of what I want to talk about. But next weekend we have the Holistic Expo. We'll be there here in Omaha. We'll be there on Saturday and Sunday, and I have an hour to speak to the audience on Saturday morning. And then the next week is the National Occupational Therapy Conference, so I've got 2 more weekends to make it through before I have a break and I can start writing again. Anyway, today I wasn't sure that I was going to get this out. My daughter texted me this morning and said, "Hey, Clark wants to hang out with you today. Do you want to hang out? And do you have time? Do you have any energy for that?" And I'm like, bring her over. Clark is my granddaughter. She's 7 years old, and we hung out for about 4.5 hours earlier today, and it was awesome just to do 7-year-old things for 4 hours. It was great. We went on walks, we picked up sticks, we climbed snow mountains, we colored, we played cards, we played matching games, we just did 7-year-old things. So my brain is doing better. So what I wanted to talk about today was the Nebraska OT Association afternoon session that we did yesterday. It was absolutely phenomenal. The group of people that was in the room they were so gracious, and I kind of felt like this presentation that I put together was sort of like, hey, people, listen to me, this is important. You need to know the science of the fascial system because it will help you with what you're trying to do with your patients and your clients. And when I put this together, it was almost like I was shaking my fists in the air. But it ended up being just a really good presentation that even though a lot of people in the room were people that have heard me talk before, they still learned something new. So the title of the presentation, I think I'm going to record it and put it online as a free CE option for people to listen to and just sort of hear my perspective on that, but might hit a few highlights here for you today. So the title of the presentation was called Time for an Upgrade, the Case for Updating Occupational Therapy Practice with Fascia Science. And I would put your own profession in there. If you're not an occupational therapist, if you're an OT assistant, if you're a PT, if you're a psychotherapist, if you're whoever you are out there, massage therapist, you need to know fascia science if you're working with people, and not just the body, but if you're trying to work with the brain, because the brain gets the input from the body, you need to understand fascia science. So anyway, so I was talking just a little bit about why it's important, and specifically to the profession of occupational therapy, and how it's really in our practice standards, the OTPF4, the accreditation standards, that we need to understand the body. And our understanding of the body is now incomplete now that we have all this fascia science. So you have a duty. You basically have a duty to know this information. And now there's a new standard coming out, which I think I talked about a couple podcasts ago, that it's about, there's also this new standard that woven into the B standards about interventions to support well-being. Example, complementary and integrative health. And that would maybe include all the things that keep the fascia healthy, the wellness aspects of it. But I'm going to argue that learning fascia science is not complementary or integrative. It's part of the human body, and you need to know it if you're going to be a health professional. And yes, if you don't know it exists, no shame, no shade, whatever the word is now. But when you are exposed to it and you finally understand that this is a new understanding of the human body, you need to seek it out and learn it. Okay, but a lot of the practices that we use to treat it could definitely still be categorized as complementary or integrative. But yay for the profession of occupational therapy that we're finally recognizing from the educational standpoint that these things need to be part of the occupational therapy and OTA education, because people are out there seeking for it, looking for it, and we at least need to be able to talk about it with our clients if we're not offering it ourselves. Okay, so I kind of compared this advancement in understanding fascial system to some of the advancements that have happened in the past, like understanding that the brain is plastic, and the whole concept of neuroplasticity. That was like a big shift a long time ago. And then another big shift has been the microbiome, and really understanding that at a deeper level that has changed a lot of the thinking and the practices about things like nutrition. So we just the fascia is sort of that next wave, and I think the next wave that's going to come around maybe in another 20, 30, 40, 50 years is going to be the energy and the input there. But what I really wanted to focus in on today was I shared a little bit about an article from Thomas Myers called Spatial Medicine, A Call to Arms, and this was in Science Direct, Journal of Bodywork and Movement Therapies. This was back in 2014, so this was a while ago, but it still really applies. It really applies to the world, and let me explain. So in this article, he talks about the 4 different elements in our common physical experience: space, matter, time, and energy. And he talks about these 4 different kinds of medicine. And the first one is material medicine. And material medicine is the medicine of substances, and that how over the history of man we have used things like herbs and things to treat the body. And we've now used nutrition. Food as medicine is becoming a thing as well. But we've had medications for a very long time, and that is one of our primary means of treating the body now. Excuse me. So people are turning to medications right and left, right? But now a lot of people are starting to maybe turn away from them, and they know the side effects and they know the dangers of these medications and are wanting something new. And that's where we get the nutrition, right? So material medicine, that's something that's been around for a long time. And then we also have the medicine of time, which is basically psychology and mental health professions, where we know that our brains are very good at going back in time. Our brains are also very good at going forward in time. And we need to be able to do both of those things in order to be successful at being alive in the world. But staying in the present isn't something that we often do very well anymore. And we spend way too much of our time in the past or in the future. And the past, of course, is worrying about things like regret and things we wish we should have done differently. And the future is, oh my God, this could happen or that could happen. And so we're worrying. So when we spend too much time in those places, especially if we lean to the negative, because of course you can think about goals and positive things you want to happen, and you can think about happy memories, but our brains don't tend to do that. It gets us in trouble when we spend way too much time in the past or the future, focusing more on things that are negative. So we have a whole field of medicine that can help people in that arena. And then finally, we have spatial medicine. Spatial medicine he refers to as rearranging the body in space. And his call to arms, or his call to action is we really need to be thinking about this spatial medicine piece, because people of all ages are experiencing significant decreases in their physical activities. And this is leading to reduced physical skills, which then leads to increased illness and chronic pain. And a lot of this is due to the age of technology. The way we use our bodies has really become more and more narrow. And if we think back to how we used our bodies in the hunter-gatherer times, right? It was lots of variety, and we expended our energy in order to just survive. And it was more important to try to conserve energy. And so we're really wired to want to conserve energy. But when we were doing our movement, it was highly varied. We were walking and reaching into trees to gather food and pulling up roots and sitting on the ground to prepare food and to take care of children. So all kinds of squatting and up and down from the ground all the time, and sleeping on harder surfaces so our bodies moved more even when we were sleeping. And then we go to the agricultural age, and we've narrowed how we use our body. We still use our bodies and we work hard, but it's becoming a little more repetitive and less varied. And then we go to the industrial age, and we're even less varied. We're standing maybe in front of some kind of a operating machinery, or even on a line doing something. So smaller, less mobile. And now we're in the age of technology, where we're sitting at a desk or we're sitting still using a phone, looking at a screen, and our bodies are just not being used the way that they were meant to be used in our evolutionary process. So in this age of spatial medicine, we need people who can understand and really work with the body to try and not lose the skills that we need, because, I mean, you could definitely argue that do we really need to be doing all these things? If I don't feel like it, why do I have to? Well, because a lot of our underlying physiology requires movement to function. Like, our lymphatic system needs muscular function. Our cardiovascular system the heart doesn't do the whole job. The muscles help a lot to move the blood through the system. and our ground substance in our fascial system, which is incredibly important in the overall function and health of the body in so many areas, also needs us to move, to compress, to extend, to twist, to reach, to bend, to all the things in order to move that fluid and refresh that fluid. And when we don't, and it gets thick, it gets sticky, we get sticky, more fibrotic areas in our fascia where that fluid can't move hardly or at all, then we get into a lot of trouble with our health. So we need people that can understand that whole spatial medicine piece and how they can work with the body. And I don't think that, I'm not going to, I'm standing for this episode. I'm not going to stand here and say, you've got to learn myofascial techniques. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. There's so many other ways to reach into the body and make it healthy. So many different kind of movement options, stretching options. And like my stand, sit, desk is one way to add variety into my movement and how I use my body when I'm trying to do things like write a textbook and do a podcast and run a business. I need that variety in my body. When I go to do my workout, which, I don't like because we're not wired to want to. I don't understand people who love working out. And you, my friends out there, you know who you are. And I love you, but I don't understand you. So, but I try to incorporate as much variety in that as possible. So anyway, this call to arms article that Thomas Myers wrote back in 2014 is still important and applicable today, and I would say even more so, because we're seeing younger and younger and younger children using devices, looking at screens, and being more still. And some of that also comes from just sort of the way the world has evolved. And I read a book, oh gosh, I'm not going to come up with the name of it now. I will try to find that and put it in the description for the podcast. But it was a attorney that decided she didn't love being an attorney, and she went to work in a university, and she ended up being the dean of freshmen or something like that. Working with the younger cohort of students at the undergraduate level. And she started noticing a trend back in the day, the helicopter parent trend, and how things sort of shifted from these young people coming to college and just kind of moving through the system to all of a sudden parents are calling all the time wanting to say, well, my son or daughter isn't getting along with their roommate. I would like that changed, please. And rather than letting the young person advocate for themselves. So that's one example of helicopter parenting. And I experienced it myself when I was teaching 20 years ago, of getting calls saying, my daughter's never gotten anything under an A before. So that's helicopter parenting. But anyway, the point I wanted to make was she was talking about why did this happen, and started really thinking about what has changed. And one of the things that she talked about and that really resonated with me and how I thought about how this affected me personally. Back in, if you remember when a young boy, Johnny Gosh, was kidnapped and killed. And I'm not going to remember all these details. And then there was a television show. I think it was Walsh, Tim Walsh. His son, Adam Walsh, was kidnapped and killed. And his dad created this television show that was all about kids and stories about things happening. And that combined with the whole idea of putting kids' faces on milk cartons so that they could, which was a great idea to help say, hey, have you seen this child? We're looking for this child, to get it out in a bigger, broader way was a really clever idea. But it also put tremendous fear into parents. And, when I was a kid, I was able to run the neighborhood till the lights went down or the sun went down. And then my mom had this great big bell. I think it was a cast iron bell on the back of our door. And she would just ring the heck out of that. It was like a foot tall, foot wide bell. And you could hear that thing on the other side of the neighborhood. So if we heard that bell, that was time for us to come home. But it was usually when the sun was starting to go down. So we were running with our neighborhood kids and, riding our bikes and climbing trees and playing in the little creek and just doing the thing that kids used to do all the time. And I remember, because my kids were born, 88 and 93. And I remember the first time we moved to Omaha, and in my mind, Omaha was a big city. Because I graduated with 39 kids in my class, grew up in the country, and Omaha was a big city. And I remember my husband and I were out running errands and came back, and my son wasn't there, and his bike was gone. And he and the neighbor kid had ridden their bikes, I think 7 blocks away to a convenience store. And I freaked out because I did not anticipate talking about some of these things today, but I freaked out because I was like, oh my God, what could have happened to him in those 7 blocks? And anyway, I freaked out, and I know it's because it's been implanted in my mind from these television shows that your kid could easily if you don't have eyes on that kid, they could easily become kidnapped and horrible things can happen to them. And I have no idea the statistics of how often these things really happen. They do happen, and I'm definitely not making light of that, but all I really want to talk about is how much that has changed what kids are allowed to do. And then kids are home more, or they're playing in their yard if they even have a yard. How often do they and there's many kids, I'm sure, that don't really even have green spaces available to them. So they're stuck inside more. I think, where I'm going with this. So kids aren't allowed free play. And then also then there was the rise of more structured sports for younger and younger kids. And so then kids get into things that are maybe very repetitive, and maybe they stick with it, like soccer, but it's not free play. It's not free play using your body in super varied ways. It's great, it's healthy, but is it really enough of what kids need? My daughter, I happened to come across at one point when the kids were really small of a preschool it was called Nature Preschool. And that's a lot of what they did was you drop them off for preschool, and they had tons of outdoor free play all year long, all the seasons. And they just here's a bunch of sticks and out in nature. And they had a blast. They absolutely loved it. And I think that was great for their bodies and good for their minds as well when kids aren't allowed to have free play. I'm not a peds therapist, but the point I'm trying to make is kids are not developing the same way they have in the past decades. And we need to find, and there's consequences for that. And I think a lot of the consequences are in the fascial system, and there's things that we can do to help them. And especially when there's lots of things that are being done now to help them. But when you understand the fascial system, that can be another layer to your understanding and help you come up with even more innovative ideas. And I was talking with one of the therapists after the session yesterday, who was a peds therapist, and she was saying, yeah, we do this and we do this, but I've never thought about how that's affecting the fascial system. And I said, yeah, and if you understand the type of movement that the fascial system needs, you're probably doing a lot of it, but could you make it even more intentional so that you build in a lot more compression and extension and expansion, I should say, in the fascial system, so you're getting that stretching and that movement and that intentional movement of the ground substance, even though you're allowing this freedom of movement of the child and letting them choose what they do. How can you provide them with options? Because I would bet that they will go to the options that they need. But if you're not applying options for lots of this, coming up into a little ball to compress, then will they do it? Will they choose it? Especially if they're not acting, their bodies aren't being utilized, or they're used to being utilized in the way that really they should be. Okay, so I wanted to also just weave in here, where are we for time? We're about 30 minutes. So I just wanted to weave in one more concept that I think goes with this, and that is that whole idea of, because there was the different kinds of medicine, the medicine of time. I think the fascia is also part of that idea of the medicine of time, because our fascia basically tells the story of our lifetime. When I'm talking with clients and I'm listening to their story, and I'm taking them way back sometimes, depending on what's going on, and they're telling me about what they did or didn't do as a kid, and then did they play sports as a teenager, did they go to undergraduate school, then a master's degree, then a PhD, all that time sitting and looking at a device, and what kind of exercise did they do in there? Did they go to the gym? Did they take walks on their breaks? Did they teach yoga for a job? Were they somebody who experienced abuse? Were they... All of that information is stored in the fascia. And I don't mean that in sort of this, what's the right word, esoteric way, this sort of energy way. I'm saying that in a very literal way, because if someone hasn't been really using their body in a way that's going to keep the fascia balanced, the tension balanced, like you could have maybe abuse when you were younger and be someone who didn't play any sports and you loved to read. But if you also went for walks or took hikes, then you're going to chase some of that tension out. And then you're not going to have that timestamp of tension in your fascial system. Like now, I mean, if I took myself as an example, I've had some things, right, in my lifetime, but I try to erase them in the fascia through how I move and how I take care of myself and how I try to eat so I can keep the inflammation down in my body. So thinking about the spatial medicine piece and the medicine of time, when we prepare, but when we use the right techniques and tools to erase the tension, we're kind of erasing some of those old things that might be stuck in the body. And that can be, of course, be done through hands-on techniques, self-treatment, things like that we teach our clients as well. And then you're preparing the next part of that continuance of time with a much healthier fascial system. And those timestamps are the things that eventually unfold and we experience as tension, as pain, as disease in the body. So just some thoughts that have sort of been piling up after all these presentations and workshops and thoughts post-workshop as well. So anyway, Thank you so much. In the next few episodes, I'm hoping to get Lisa back in here this week. I've also got a fascial stretch therapist on deck to interview, and another one coming up down the line. So I think that'll be interesting as well. So thank you so much, so much for listening. I appreciate all of you, and have a great day. Bye. Thank you for tuning in to the Fascia-Informed Therapist. It's been a pleasure sharing insights and strategies to help you integrate fascia science into your practice. I'm Amy Mayer, and I hope today's episode has inspired you to explore further and take your therapeutic skills to the next level. Remember, we're committed to creating and providing top-notch, evidence-based, fascia-informed continuing education that empowers you as an occupational therapy practitioner. Stay connected with us for more enriching content, and don't forget to check out our online courses to deepen your expertise. Until next time, keep expanding your knowledge, refining your skills, and confidently applying the science of fascia to your practice. Here's to advancing together in health and wellness.